Hey, what's going on, guys? Hope everyone had a good weekend. Got back from a nice vacation, and everything kind of went as planned, right? I mean, we were talking about QQQ. I made sure everyone knew I was short that and/or Google, and that was really all I was doing. And I swung my position from Friday on Qs, pretty much all stem from what I believe to be the buy climax back here, where we saw a really, really high volume bar, and then that followed off with that sell-off, right? And that sell-off, obviously, I believe to be the beginning of the distribution. I remember their whole point is to kind of create a range to accumulate the lows, to be able to have enough to sell on exit liquidity in the UTAD, right? And so it's important to kind of watch volume here. We actually went long with institutions. We were kind of looking at dark pools. We were looking at higher lows and just overall structure. But really from the buy climax, we came down, right? We had what I believe to be the automatic reaction. And then a game of like really cat and mouse. I was, narrating this live where they were trying to, fake out bulls over the previous highs and then also any gap to ups over those highs. And then they were basically trying to trap bears on any big sell-offs that were going into the close. So you guys saw we had our first secondary test. We gapped down. We had this really, really long bar here on the hourly with high volume that was protecting the lows from the Friday liquidation. This is when I started that position back on the long. This was the minor side of weakness, as I said. We ended up rallying up near the highs here. As you guys can see, this was the big push up into the highs. And then as we hit those highs, we sold off into the close. People probably got short. What ended up happening, we ended up gapping up the next morning. People probably got long on the gap up or, potentially holding, these highs up here. People were looking for the pullback onto that. What did it do? It sold off all the way down, had a somewhat of a lower high, but then it gapped up again. People probably got long over this gap up here, or I'm sorry, these highs here as it gapped up. Then what did it do? It sold all the way back down, but I was mentioning that we were really creating a really nice higher low support or like kind of floor, and the volume is really low, right? The intent wasn't to sell. The intent was to sell on this day here, right? This Friday liquidation, but from there, intent wasn't to sell. There was no real effort despite, no real volume or intent behind what was trying to happen here. So really what came down to happening was it pushing up to the highs. How did it react at the highs? Did it make a meaningful higher high? Did it hit and reject right away? And really what we saw was a breakout through the highs here from the buy climax or that Friday liquidation bar. And then look at the spread on the candles, guys. Look how tight these hourly candles are. And you guys can see, right, there was no meaningful high volume breakout. Instead, we saw high volume sells. And then tight spread. Even the bigger candles to the upside didn't really make a meaningful higher high or have high volume behind it. So that was a really big concern. And then we sold all the way back down and came down into this little gap fill here, right? Obviously we undercut it a little bit, but as it pushed back above, I think we got long like right here. And then we ended up ripping right back to the highs. And then this is where I was like, okay, if we gap up, I am looking for a UTAD, right? We were looking for some kind of UTAD, and then it broke out, obviously gapped up again, and then this is where it turned into something I've honestly never seen before on Qs or SPY, where we had almost like a parabolic top breakout, which was, in my eyes, a UTAD, right? I mean, I've had this marked for a little bit, but we got one breakaway gap, two breakaway gap, and then the third breakaway gap here was less extensive, right? This is a big gap up from here to here, and then from here to here was a massive one. But then we started to see signs of exhaustion in terms of an exhaustion gap, and then we saw what I thought was a spinning top here at 637, and then we ended up breaking back down, right? And then we created what looked like, if you guys want to trade this way, it's fine, but like a bear flag, a 3-bar bear flag. So as we were pushing up, I think on Friday is when I went short, so right on this day here, expecting a breakdown into this gap here at 624, which was our NWOG. NWOGs are always important. We look for the distributions, especially if we gap up back into those levels. So I went short here, and then the next, luckily I was on vacation, but really the risk was against not only the highs here at 637, but the gap here, right? So we got to think the open was like right around there from the gap up here on 1028 to 1029. We literally traded upwards on low volume. We tapped 635.59, and then we ended up getting a really nasty gap down today, right? So really nice little trade here. I obviously closed a good portion of my position off of like 624. I wanted to hold some, but for the most part, I closed out all of this. You guys can see position-wise, like I made like 4,100 or 4,200 today on this. I had one other position that I had open, so that's what got me to the 5K. But yeah, nice little trade on this one. Unfortunately, I missed out on some gains because it did pull down to fill the NWOG, the overnight session at 617. Remember, these UTADs can happen very, very quickly, which is why I usually trade them. Obviously, with the market's been nonstop up, and some of these haven't really been working, but this was clear cut in my opinion, and this happened rather quickly because from this gap down here, it came down to 617. I would have expected, a lower high for it to come up here. Once it did that, I would have expected a full move down. But really, this seems like a quick trade down into 610, which is the beginning of this major breakout here, which is essentially where the distribution started. And now things kind of change, right? I'm looking for this to pull down into 610. Mitigate around 610, and if it can do that, and we go into this bullish window, right, from into November 21st, and then obviously once we hit November 21st, it's a time crunch. I always talk about that, where we have holidays coming up, so things get really crunched, and if the numbers aren't coming down, that puts a lot of pressure against those hedges, and we start to see the flows from the December and January OPEXs really start to spring the market back up and really give it some gravitational pull to the upside. So I'm looking for this to stop by probably tomorrow in terms of the selling, maybe a little bit longer, maybe until like 11.9, but I want to see some kind of quick recovery off of 610, or maybe just a little bit of consolidation where it hangs out here for a little bit while people are scared. It's always the same thing with these massive sell-offs like this, guys. What we're looking for is some kind of spike in the VIX, people to panic, some kind of capitulation, if that's the term you're looking for, where people panic and end up switching to cash. And that will kind of be the signal, right? Obviously, you don't really want to enter on a super high VIX, but we saw that happen back here on Friday, the liquidation bar on 1010, where we kind of had to take a position as the change of hands occurred, as people got scared, flipped to cash, or sold out of their equity positions, big money accumulated. It's kind of the same thing here, where I think that we could push down into this 610 spot, whether it's a consolidation or just a straight rip off of that level with a reversal. And then I think that this can trade all the way back up into 631, right? And remember, these so-called bubbles, they're not always so easy to trade, right? They don't just happen in one fell swoop where the market ends up kind of tanking. They usually happen off of like failed breakouts. And if this can pull down and be somewhat mitigated off 610, it's probably going to make a new high or push back to the highs and try to capture like late bears to the party, or people that think this is the top. The top is going to be catalyzed, and I'll tell you guys this right now. It's going to be catalyzed by something big. If there's going to be a big sell-off in the market, it's not going to be from something little. It's going to be either, in my opinion, I think it'll be like the China invading Taiwan. That's kind of the one narrative that I think could happen. It's going to be something that happens with OpenAI, where a lot of the froth that gets taken out of the market from a lot of these AI speculative names like Nvidia, Palantir. I think there's a reason that Michael Burry is short. I don't think I don't think his position has anything to do with what we're seeing here. But I mean, those would be the names and the exposures that we'd be looking for. There would be a big catalyst behind the markets coming down that drastically, but to be continued. We don't know when that will be. Until then, I just think that a lot of these big moves down will just suck in bears, and then we'll keep going higher. If this is a true distribution, this will give an LPSY, so that gives me a little bit of solace. Like, this will potentially bounce, make its way back up to 631. If it hits 631, which is this gap here, and it fails to make a new high, we could get a meaningful LPSY, right, where we end up then breaking down into the old range again, right, where we could snap back down into like 603, retest from below to 610, and then start another big event all the way back down and sweep out this meaningful, I would say this meaningful swing low here at like 589. We'd get a retest of that, right, and then from there we could see a move all the way to 580. 565 would be another major point of confluence. So there's plenty of opportunity if this is going to come lower, to not only wait for that headline to occur, but also we will get retests of key spots, like, as I just said, right? 610 from below, 589. This is a major swing low, and we know that from the volume here, and how this kind of traded relative to that spot, the institutional accumulation that was occurring off of that, right? There's some key points where we can get in if this is going to be a capitulatory event that goes way deeper than what we expect. So that is first and foremost, but yeah, this is kind of what I'm looking at, guys. Just seeing if this can, bounce off of like this 610 spot, 610.12, 610.60. We'll just round it off to 610, and then look for a big move all the way back up to 631. I really like the December contracts. I think that gives us plenty of time. This could happen by 11:21. I wouldn't put it by the market right now, but yeah, that's really what I'm looking for. There's a lot of events that could catalyze a move back up, right? I mean, the government shutdown ending. We still have news with China and the U.S. Negotiations. There's a lot that could happen. So, congrats though. I mean, this was a big trade. I had about 10 contracts on this one, so really nice trade here. Obviously ETHA, what I started on that one did not work, so I closed that today. I'm still looking at kind of like a protective name. Sorry, that came out weird, but USO, USO, right? US Oil. Name looks pretty good here. It looks like it's kind of setting up some kind of catalyst to occur. I still think the Venezuela stuff will happen probably before December. I was looking at Polymarket. I mean, it's like a 98% chance this happens before December. If that's going to happen, right, I mean, oil is going to take off. I looked at XLE. I don't like the chart nearly as much, but this looks pretty good how it broke out on high volume here on 1022, filled the gap, and then has pulled back into the gap on low volume, and now we have a really nice progression gap, or I don't know why I almost said progressive gap, but progression gap to work off of, kind of basing risk off 70, 77. Maybe a little bit of a breakout over 72.51, and then from here, right, I think we can get a big markup into 75, maybe a slight pullback off 75, and then a rally to finish this off into 77. It could go a lot higher, but yeah, the 76 calls for January look pretty damn good. So that's the kind of a focus that I'm looking at. And then I mentioned Microsoft, right? Microsoft is another name that I'm kind of taking a look at. If the market is going to go higher, I think that we do need to get a breadth increase. So obviously, like, we need healthcare to participate. We would need, like energy to participate. We would need different sectors to kind of give us that last oomph. But also some of the names in the Mag 7 that really haven't been participating. We saw Microsoft obviously have a really nice move going into earnings, and then after earnings, right, this sold off, but it's selling off on a pretty nice divergence here, right? You guys can clearly see the divergence in volume. I was struggling a little bit as to where this would pull down into. If you guys remember, I tried to take this on Friday. I got a little bit too crazy with my contracts, and I haven't done that in a while. And I was, pretty transparent about that loss. I lost like 5K or something like that, but I got it back on Google. And then also Qs were a nice part of that. But Google, I didn't explicitly alert. They were 0-day. That could have gone either way for people, and I took 100 contracts. So I was kind of worried about alerting that one. But that's where I try to take it here, 523. But now, like, this looks pretty clear, where there's a clear, daily equal low sequence from this gap here at 506, where we really built out from like 912 all the way to 1017. So basically a month of daily equal lows consolidating against 506. I really think that this could be the add spot, kind of in this general area here, and then saving the bulk of the position for the actual gap fill at 501. And if it can give us something like this, or even if it does that and then it pulls back and bases again and gives another higher low off 506, I think this has a really clean chance to make its way back up to 541. I will say, if you guys are late to this, guys, there's always an opportunity. You could get this on a either a divergent flag off 530, or a breakout above 530.48, and then it bases it, and then you can get a final move to 541. And I really think that this is like one of the bigger tech names to be able to catch a bounce. Weekly looks pretty good as well, right? Weekly obviously looks kind of drastic with this like double top, devil horn look. But for the most part, the sell-off's been pretty mitigated. It's coming into a really, really big weekly spot with a lot of consolidation and likely a lot of willing buyers. So that's kind of what I'm looking at, guys. It's really just QQQ, Microsoft, and USO for that oil exposure. And that's all I kind of got for you guys. So that's gonna wrap this video up. Hope everyone had a good weekend. It was a nice little vacation, and it was nice to come back to some gains today. I really didn't have to do too much with that one, but that's all I'm going to show for today. Hope everyone, see you guys tomorrow. Super easy.